Hello YouTube. For the past few weeks I felt like my life was a little bit too much fun. So in order to compensate for that, there was only one thing that I could realistically do. I booted up Elder Scrolls Blades again. Now, in all seriousness, last video I complained about my account being lost and the Bethesda customer support not being very helpful while I wanted to research a video. Well, it turns out that I was complaining a little bit too soon, as hours after the video they restored my entire account plus some compensation for the lost time. So Larry and RJ from customer support, if you guys are watching this, sorry for me complaining about being an idiot last week and thanks for reinstating my account. That said, today we are talking about an important political lore discovery that was recently done in the Elder Scrolls Blades regarding Hammerfell, and some smaller discoveries that were made but I never really got the chance to talk about. So without further ado, let us begin. Let's begin with the bigger discovery of the few, the discovery about Hammerfell. In the previous video that I did on the lore that we can find in the Elder Scrolls Blades, we already got some insight into the political situation of Hammerfell after the Empire renounced it as a province during the Great War, when they were under pressure of the White Gold Concordat terms. Previous video we talked about the Altmer wizard in the game telling us that his kind is not really welcome in Hammerfell after the war. This basically confirmed the story that Kamatu presents us in Skyrim, that Hammerfell after the war is not under the influence of the Dominion but is at least independent. Now, a new discovery has been made in the Elder Scrolls Blades which alludes to there being some form of Imperial influence in Hammerfell. You see, in the Elder Scrolls Blades they added arena fights to your Radiant quests. The people that challenge you in this arena, they are all unique characters with their own story and dialogue to challenge the town champion, or you, the player. Most of these characters are just garbage, and I won't talk about them. Even if their story is remotely interesting, it's usually very short and not impactful on the greater scheme of things. But so far, there is one arena fighter which has a pretty interesting story. Might I say, a very interesting story, that has the potential to be pretty huge lore-wise. I'm talking about the Redguard swordsman Dinahan Al-Rihad, a Redguard swordsman who challenges you to a duel while he is in your town on his way back to Hammerfell after the war. Now, what's very interesting is that he is not just a Redguard swordsman, he is the prince of the Hammerfell kingdom of Rihad, who has been granted asylum in the Empire while the Dominion troops occupy the city. When you approach him for the first time, he tells you that he is Prince Dinahan, rightful heir to the throne of Rihad, and that he's been granted asylum by the Emperor. He has stopped by your town on his way to Rihad to take the throne back now that the war is over. He then asks you to spar with him, but not to kill him, as he says that his death would be an embarrassment for the Emperor, who would then lose support amongst Hammerfell loyalists. And he states that his death would be a diplomatic incident. This is pretty interesting, as it essentially means that the Empire kept assisting Hammerfell by, among other things, granting asylum to local leaders during the war, and that there were still Imperial loyalists in the province even after the war. In addition to that, it could mean that while the population of Hammerfell might be a bit resentful for the Empire renouncing them as a province and basically leaving them to the Dominion even though they didn't really have a chance, many of the leaders and nobles in Hammerfell, in previously occupied territory especially, might be still pro-Imperial, as they were all granted asylum and helped by the Empire even after the Empire renounced them as a province. The fact that in Skyrim we get some limited information regarding Hammerfell's fate, and then now in the Elder Scrolls Blades Bethesda basically drip feeds us new lore bits, really pushes me towards thinking that the Elder Scrolls 6 will indeed take place in Hammerfell. But that could of course just be my stupid lizard brain talking. Anyway, I found this a very interesting discovery, especially since we didn't really know a lot about Hammerfell's politics, and that every little bit of information could be relevant. And especially something so blatantly political lore as this could be pretty relevant. So now, let's talk about some of the smaller discoveries that were made in the game, especially some discoveries about the things we were not yet sure of in the last video on the Elder Scrolls Blades lore. For example, the year the Elder Scrolls Blades plays in. Last video I speculated that it takes place just after the Great War. I was kinda right on that, however we now know the more exact date, as we now know that the game takes place in the year 180 of the 4th era. We know this because one of the characters in the game mentions it being 5 years ago since the end of the Great War, meaning that it's either the year 180 or the year 185, as the war in Hammerfell ended 5 years after it ended in Cyrodiil. However, there is one more bit of info regarding the time frame of the game, as in the game each item has a description and one specific item can help us with this time frame. To be specific, the Winterhold banner. The item has the description that it was roughly 50 years ago when the Winterhold suffered its great collapse. Now, in lore, the great collapse took place in the year 122 of the 4th era. Adding 50 years to that gives us the year 172 of the 4th era, so keep in mind that the description says roughly, so in this case it would mean that it's not 50 years ago but 58 years ago, as that is the amount of years until the end of the Great War. To me, it seems logical to assume that it's then the year 180 of the 4th era when the game takes place, as this is closer to the 50 years since Winterhold's collapse. This would essentially mean that the game takes place 21 years before the events of Skyrim. Another thing basically backing this up is that now Prince Dinahan can return to Hammerfell, you know, the guy we talked about like a few minutes ago. Which means that probably the war has just ended in Hammerfell. Another confirmation of the year 180. Another thing we have more information on now is the canon name and location of the town the game plays in. The town's canon default name is Rivercrest, and while the location of the town is still highly speculative, the community has been able to pinpoint somewhat of a location. Specifically, my friend Grandmaster Joffrey, who also helped with the earlier segment on Prince Dinahan, and who is a huge Wiki contributor, he did a lot of research regarding the town's location. The town is located in a small vassal kingdom of the Empire under the Bloodfolk Queen, an Imperial vassal. And Grandmaster Joffrey managed to piece together most of the location lore in the game and pinpointed this area as the most likely area this kingdom and thus the town is most likely located in. He says that it's most likely that the kingdom is somewhere in this area, and he speculates this because we have jobs and missions taking place in these areas, which are all in or around Western Cyrodiil. In addition to that, the town has a port, meaning that it's access to the sea or it has access to some kind of large river. In addition to that, the town citizens say that the town is very far from the Empire center, which would check out in this case. The final argument for this is that the kingdom of the Bloodfolk Queen is being crossed by one of the roads leading to the Imperial city, which leads here. Meaning that this is really the most likely candidate area based on all the evidence. I have to say though, I'm not 100% convinced. This is partly because this strip of land is uncomfortably close to the Dominion and it would be somewhat of a risk for a former Blade to hide there, which is basically the entire plot of the Elder Scrolls Blades. But I can't say that I have a better location to pinpoint, as I personally started to speculate that the kingdom was most likely somewhere here, but this area is not close to any Cyrodiilic roads. It's a very underdeveloped area, far away from the Empire center. It has access to the sea and is on its way to Hammerfell, making it logical that Prince Dinahan Al-Rihad passed through here. So this would be the ideal location for the village. However, we know that a road to the Imperial city crosses through the kingdom, and that essentially falsifies this entire theory, as, well, there's simply no road close to this point. That said, I did make some other small discoveries in Blades that are not as impactful. For example, we know that cities without sewers in Cyrodiil use a lot of outhouses, even though we see almost none of those in the game. We learned that elven greatswords are actually pretty rare on Tamriel, as almost no Altmer wants to use a two-handed weapon. And finally, we learned from the item description of bronze that in the Elder Scrolls universe there was in fact a sort of Bronze Age, as it states that long ago most weapons were made out of bronze. So that said, that was another video on Elder Scrolls Blades. Yay, life is fun, right? If you have to play this game. That said, we did reach the end of this video. Before I end it, however, allow me to thank my top patrons, Mr. Bernardo Binna, Metalloid1v1, Mr. Christmas, Mr. Gabriel Binna, and Mr. Hayden Barnes. They, along with the other amazing people on screen, are my patrons and they keep this channel running. That said, I hope you enjoyed this video and liked it enough to maybe stick around until the next lore video, coming Thursday. That said, if you want personal contact with me, my Instagram and Discord are all in the description. I recommend sending me a personal message instead of trying to go in any of my comment sections or something like that, since a personal message is way likelier to be seen by me, and I usually answer even though it's sometimes really late. I'm sorry, I get a lot of messages. That said, I will see you next Thursday in the next Elder Scrolls lore video. Bye bye.